This is the hell that's Lysychansk, and it's a hell that never falls silent. Look to the right of that huge black plume of smoke. That fresh puff is yet another shell exploding on an horizon already foggy with destruction. The city's being surrounded by Russian troops bit by bloody bit. This bridge over the railway was the main route in. The Russian circle's nearly complete. The attackers are using brute force to sledgehammer their way in from several directions. We drove in as they mounted their latest ferocious onslaught on the city's oil refinery, the second largest in Ukraine.
I don't think we should hang around here too long.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. At this point, Lysychansk is the last stronghold in the Luhansk region of the Donbass. Losing this city will be a monumental loss. Part of the plant is on fire. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. And we're with the last group who've decided it's time to leave as well. But the Ukrainians are fighting the fight of their lives. And they've been battling over this pocket of the Donbass for months. We're with the soldiers of the 24th Brigade, sworn to secrecy about their exact location inside the plant. They're pulling out of the refinery to another fighting position. The Russian troops are only 500 meters away, and they've come under savage attack here. They're bitterly disappointed about losing their twin city of Severodonetsk a few days earlier. It's made their defense of Lysychansk all the more important. They don't want to give up an inch of territory, but they follow their orders. Yes, he says, it was right to give up Severodonetsk to save lives. But every bit swallowed up by the Russians hurts deeply, and their enemies are making slow but steady progress. We are leaving, the battalion commander tells us, but he doesn't see this as defeat, more a tactical withdrawal. Like Severodonetsk beforehand, they're anxious to avoid large-scale deaths and injuries. But even as they hastily relocated, there was an air of this being the final battle for Lysychansk. They've held the Russians at bay for weeks now, forcing some heavy losses on them and buying time to build up defences in Donetsk, the second half of the Donbass where the Russians will move to next. But they're coming under intense pressure on the Donbass battlefield, and even relocating involves casualties as they're forced to run the gauntlet of fresh shelling. Amid the mayhem of this grim fighting, the explosions and hurry to shift has led to a head-on crash. The injured are having to be rapidly extracted and treated, whilst the heavy smog offers them some slight cover. Those who make it out alive from the line of fire are utterly exhausted and high on relief and almost surprised they're still in one piece.
Всем привет! Hello!
But there's a growing exasperation at what they see as the delay in sending long-range artillery and better weapons for them to somehow finish this fighting.
It would be much better if you sent us some new weapons.
Are you struggling with the stuff you've got at the moment?
Well, can't say that we're struggling, but it would be much better, you know. They take high losses, we need to retreat, but in the end, again, they will go forward again, we will beat them with artillery. They will, again, they have a great amount of losses.
So what's your message to NATO and the rest of Europe?
Stop being
The foot soldiers aren't mincing their words anymore. But there's a determination and courage here that far outstrips the diminishing odds of victory, even as they race to a front to replace colleagues and where they're vastly outnumbered and outflanked.
They're still showing peace signs, so I'm getting the impression they're still very optimistic. What's your feeling?
Ми так само. Ми всегда за. Ми Україну не здамо.
19-year-old Eugene has a face etched with the grime of war and seeing friends die in Severodonetsk. He spent 4 months sleeping and battling inside this armoured vehicle. He's old enough to fight and nearly die, but young enough to question withdrawing from Lysychansk.
Конечно, обидно, то что если мы просто его, считай, почти отдали. Северодонецк, да, нас там задавили, а з Лисичанська просто починаємо уходити. Лично моє мнение, там можна було б ще хоч трохи не подержати.
But the city is being changed beyond recognition, with every major landmark in the centre damaged or destroyed. It's a mass of debris and destruction. The city's authorities and police say already about 3/4 of the area is devastated. There are several thousand residents still here, where the rumble of deadly weaponry is now part of their daily routine and increased with a savage intensity over the past few days. Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armory which is trying to encircle the city, and they keep landing every 2 minutes. The sun sets on Lysychansk, with residents acutely aware these are the final few days under Ukrainian control. Even in the shelters, everyone sleeps with the rumble of war above ground all night. We've agreed not to film those who we're sheltering with, but there are many families with young children here. The first sounds at dawn in the city are always the same now. The whistle of incoming fire from close-by Russian positions. And they're getting closer by the hour. We spot the Ukrainians driving back captured Russian armour, their blue and yellow flag flying above it now. Their proximity means they're firing shells with more deadly repetition, forcing the curious nearby residents to take cover all the time. The Ukrainians are inflicting some serious casualties on their Russian enemies, but it's still not enough to hold them back. How it happened? Civilians lead us to the body of a Russian soldier, which they say was dumped out of the captured personnel carrier. He'd obviously been badly hurt and had a tourniquet around his leg. The discarded Russian army uniforms have been laid out for the residents to see, while the police document all the evidence for any future investigation, including exactly how he died and what he was doing. With no electricity, there's no operating morgue, but his DNA will be taken to try to identify him.
Це, найперше за все, люди. І з нашої сторони буде зроблено все, щоб тіло потрапило до родичів.
Volunteers have the awful task of bagging the corpse. Then the body is loaded into one of the few operating vehicles in the city. A larder so small, one of the volunteers has to sit cradling the dead Russian soldier on his lap whilst his colleagues finish up gathering his personal items. Both life and death in Lysychansk is utterly surreal. Unbeknown to us, Russian media is now broadcasting images of their troops inside the city's oil refinery, where we saw such savage engagement the day before. The plant is only 6 miles from the city centre. In the heart of the city where we are, the Ukrainians are trying to keep them from coming any further for as long as possible. But this enemy is smashing its way in. Okay, they're landing every few minutes, and this one's been quite close. The city has been bombed to bits.
It's not easy.
Vitaly, one of the police still here, cannot believe the level of destruction. About 70% of the city centre has gone.
I think that the infrastructure of Lysychansk will be destroyed as Severodonetsk infrastructure. I think it will be similar.
Severodonetsk is just over this bombed bridge, now under Russian control. Lysychansk is on the brink of being next. Aid centre after aid centre has been shattered. This seems a deliberate attempt to starve the city into submission. So this used to be a humanitarian hub, and you can see it's absolutely destroyed by fire, by all sorts. And they're coming under continual sustained attack. The Russians are destroying everything in their path. if and when they do finally take over Lysychansk, they're going to inherit a pile of rubble. It's down to a few brave volunteers to deliver any aid. There are about 10 to 15,000 people still in Lysychansk, and they're very divided over who's to blame for all this. Many, like Svetlana, don't want to leave. Vitaly, the volunteer, has brought a few essentials, all desperately hard to get hold of now. Her husband Fedya shows us the bunker where they flee when the shelling's too intense. Fedya doesn't buy into the Western war narrative. He lives in a very pro-Russian area and is reluctant to say who is the aggressor.
Кто его знает, чи Зеленский, чи Украина, вернее, Россия свое, Зеленский свое доказывает. И там не знаешь, кто вот уже пенсии 5 месяцев, нема. Ни Зеленский не платит, ни Россия не платит. Все. Вот то. Как бачишь, картошку последнюю доедаем и все.
There's a deep suspicion about Ukrainian soldiers here, where pro-Russian separatists have made their mark. Much of the misery, the daily, even hourly struggle to survive is blamed on them. Even finding water is a mission. And listen to what they're singing. It's a Soviet victory tune.
Привет, а вы откуда?
Where are you from? Another asks us.
А вы откуда? С России, это, с Америки? А?
Британская.
Британия?
Британия.
Так не пишите правду. Правду не пишите.
At one of the city's lakes where they're getting water, few will talk to us. This group blames the Ukrainian government and all supporting them. Who do you blame for the whole thing?
Украинцев. Ну это они же развязали, никто ж другой. Россия наоборот хочет помочь Украине.
The trees offer some visual cover, but no one feels safe here. No one is safe, and every hour the city edges closer to being cut off. So in this crazy urban battlefield, contact from faraway family brings tears and joy.
Спасибо вам большое.
She's very worried about the Russians coming. Neighbours find themselves on opposite sides of this war.
Спасибо, спасибо, спасибо большое. Знаєте, коли вона кончиться? Скажіть, пожалуйста, коли кончиться війна? Коли? Сил уже немає, немає сил. Коли кончиться війна, скажіть.
But there's no sign of an end at all. These Ukrainian special forces inside the city centre are part of the troops stopping the Russians from entering. Each delay allows time for more bolstering of defensive positions elsewhere. But for every inch of territory, the Russian troops are paying for it heavily in lives and equipment. And there are frantic last attempts to persuade people to leave.
Не собирался. Почему? Просто думаем, что дальше ждем.
Ну, что дальше? Дальше ждем боевых действий.
Уже идут.
И вы видите, интенсивность с каждым днем все больше и больше.
Уже идут.
Поэтому есть смысл.
Есть
смысл на какое-то время сейчас покинуть территорию активных боевых действий. Ну, тем самым спасти себя хотя бы. Понимаете?
Могу пройти?
Да, идите, пожалуйста.
He isn't convinced. Many fear they'll never return if they leave. But some have no choice. Hennadi's held out so long, but with the fighting almost on his doorstep, he's taking probably his last chance to leave. Among those fleeing, a young mother and her teenage son. A few hours earlier, they were scrambling out of their burning home after it was hit. Her husband didn't make it. They have no idea where they're going or where they'll stay.
Бомбежку пережили, мины пережили, ракеты пережили, грады пережили. Но мой муж не пережил грады. Его полностью разорвало. Мы его похоронили во дворе. Сегодня нас военные вывезли.
They flee as Russian troops have all but surrounded their city. Losing here means losing the whole of one half of the Donbass, but the miracle is how long the Ukrainians have held out here for. Those left behind have been caught between two armies. The Russians deny they're targeting civilians, but plenty of homes have been hit in the fight to seize this city. A few meters away from the flames in this building, we find Ihor, a pensioner who's struggling to accept his flat's been bombed overnight. Both floors above his are burned right through.
Are you still staying in there?
Да, конечно. А куда мне? У меня нога болит. Куда мне идти? Мне некуда.
With smoking flats all around, his determined sprinkling of water to bring down the heat doesn't seem nearly enough to stop the fire's march. Yet the pain of giving up what's his is too much. And it's this refusal to give in that we've seen repeated over and over again in this country.